Hi, I'm Rosalie Marshall and I'm joined today by Jim Killock, the Chief Executive of the Open Rights Group, to discuss illegal downloading. This will be the second part in a two-part series for our Information Overload Summit. Hi, Jim.
Hiya.
So, do you reckon we can ever stop illegal downloading? I spoke to TalkTalk's Executive Director for Strategy and Regulation the other day, Andrew Heaney, and he said pirates are just too tech-savvy these days and there's just no way we'll ever stop it.
Copyright has never been completely enforced. It just doesn't work like that. It's essentially a fairly voluntary system in actual fact. And you can dissuade people. The best way to dissuade people of infringing copyright in general is you just make it easier not to infringe copyright and to make sure that the things which might be infringing are covered adequately and well by commercial alternatives. And it is clearly the case that there is never, I don't think even the music industry think that copyright infringement online is going to completely stop and never occur. So I think Andrew's basically right that you can't eliminate it. Where I think he and I would agree though that you can outcompete it because peer-to-peer services are actually pretty boring, pretty bad. They don't add a lot of value to the content. They don't necessarily help you find new things. What they do essentially is just distribute it. So a distribution mechanism, not a discovery, or not an easy discovery mechanism perhaps. So I think there's an awful lot of potential to outcompete it, do it better, and also to license similar services. But that's not the same thing as saying you can eliminate copyright infringement by chasing people away.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. How do we stop? How can we stop illegal downloading? So now you've mentioned these new services. There are a number of new services that have been developing. I don't know whether I'm thinking on the same lines as you, but I'm thinking of music services like Spotify and Sky Songs and TV services like iPlayer. What do you think of these new services? Are they developed to the right standard, or have they still got a long way to go?
Well, a lot of them are definitely huge steps in the right direction, and we can see that again. The incidence of infringement online, people saying that they're downloading things without permission, is dropping very dramatically. Every survey we hear says it's reduced by about half, or the number of downloaders has dropped by about 40%. So, obviously they're having an effect, and particularly because a lot of them are the sort of services a bit like radio, where it's all about, I wonder if I can listen to this, and what does that sound like, and was that a good track? And you go off and you listen to those things on something like Spotify or Last.fm or whatever it happens to be, and you get the instant hit, you listen to the music you want, and you don't have to try to download it illicitly. So that they're going in the right direction. Where they're not quite there, I think, is the range. There's fairly generic. The content isn't always there. And of course, in Spotify's case, they've stopped taking customers on because the pricing for them is too high to be able to turn a profit because it's based on unit prices. So there is a problem. It's less now in the technologies and the ways to find new legal offerings. It's actually in the pricing structure and the way that licensing works online. Spotify has to pay a set fee per track that it streams. And that's in contrast to radio, for instance. If a radio station plays a track, it pays a percentage of its advert revenue for that license. And that means that it gets so many adverts and then can broadcast and it can make a profit and everybody's happy. If radio stations had to pay, a block fee before they could broadcast, no one had set radio stations up. But that's the situation we've got on the net. So there's clearly some need for licensing changes actually to get these products really out to market.
So is that a real case of the music industries and film still believing that the internet is more of a threat than an opportunity?
Well, yeah. I mean, what they seem to be doing is they're trying to hold the prices as high as possible. And they're not looking at this in quite the right way. They're trying to compare the net and people's behaviour on the net to the way that they used to sell CDs. So they're thinking, okay, there's a small number of people who are going to spend very, very large amounts of money, £100, £200 a year on our services, and they're absolutely petrified that they'll lose those if they make content generally available. The result is that some of that's going walkabouts. Well, there's no real evidence that these people are going to stop spending money on music. Where the danger is, I think, actually, is that people will find other things to do, or get into other spending habits. What the industry needs to do is absolutely engage with their customers to get their attention, get their interest, and find the things that these people will spend money on additionally. And there will be plenty of those opportunities. And I think, frankly, in the market economy, we can expect companies to provide those value-added services that really rake profits in. I mean, that's the whole point of a market economy.
So like live music or...
Live music, premium downloads, access to bands. There's a huge range of possibilities. It could be, buying books about, or special, gift-wrapped sort of products, who knows. But the point is, you can find those things, and people want to spend money on those sort of activities, those sort of products. It's just up to the music industry to separate that out a little bit from the sort of mass radio market, which is the other part of what the internet's going to do for everybody. And that involves making content more available and making sure that everybody can get hold of and find and discover new artists. That's the sort of model I think we're moving to.
Okay, so you're talking about these new models, but should there still be a stick approach as well as the carrot, or should it just be...
Well, if you can reduce copyright infringement by about half in a year by introducing 2 or 3 music services, I think that's case closed. There's absolutely no reason to have some huge wielding stick. At the same time, what's this stick going to cost? As people are talking about 200 or 300 million pounds potentially for something which might be costing something similar in lost revenues. Might be.
This is the 3 strikes.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is, it's going to mean absolute minimum. It's going to be equipment, software, administration staff, letters going out. It could be a very nice subsidy to Royal Mail, but I can't see who else is going to benefit. It certainly isn't going to be the music companies. And while they don't get the market structure right, if they do actually send out loads of letters and tell them that they're doing bad things, what it'll actually do is depress the market. If you tell somebody that they can go off and spend money on iTunes, but that's not the service they're looking for, because actually it's more like internet radio, and the internet radio sort of services they might want, like Spotify, are simply not available because they're not taking customers on, then it isn't going to work. You're going to suppress demand. These people will go away. That's not helpful for anybody.
The government's proposals, Mandelson's idea is, if the warning letters by ISPs don't work and downloading continues, then the ISPs should be in charge of cutting people off the internet. And at the Open Rights Group, you've been arguing that it's not fair to do that because people have a right to a trial or a judicial process. And the European Parliament has now said that that's not necessary. It depends how you seem to be interpreting the amendment, but...
They definitely insist that there has to be a process, and that process has to be fair, and it has to include the right to be heard. And it seems to us quite strong, and it seems to us that we're going through some detailed legal analysis, but us and other people who've looked at this think that it's a good deal stronger in terms of the protections that ought to be given than the government is currently proposing. That's an argument we will have to have, and at the end of the day that may well end up in courts, who knows.
Okay, yeah, because that's interesting, because when I did speak to the Home Office, they said that the Business Innovation Skills Department, they mentioned that they were giving people a fair procedure because they were giving people the right to appeal, but you would argue that that's not.
Well, that's right. What would be really helpful for BIS to do right now is to give us their legal analysis so we can see what their arguments are and see whether they have actually got some sort of argument that says that the new rights that the European Union are giving users are being met. Let's see whether that actually stands up. We don't think it does, but until they tell us what their arguments are, we're not really going to know. So what would be helpful for everybody is to be completely transparent, for everyone to lay their cards on the table and say what their opinions are, so we can get this legislation something close to right.
Okay. And part of the idea of the 3 strikes policy, at the end of it, is obviously the ISPs have to cut these people off. And how fair do you think that is, that they should be made responsible when it's not essentially their problem?
Okay, well, from a start, I mean, yeah, we shouldn't have the ISPs acting as police or enforcers. Absolutely not. Anything that's done to anybody in that sort of circumstance should be as a result of a court order. Is disconnection a fair response to copyright infringement? Well, clearly not. This is something which the industries are arguing is causing them limited financial harm. The answer to limited financial harm is not removing somebody's right to engage with society. Sorry, that is not proportionate. That's extremely disruptive. And also, you don't know the consequences. It might be a consequence to a whole family. It might be a consequence to somebody's business. It might cause tens of thousands of pounds of damage to somebody's life or career. You don't know. And so a court has to be involved in making a decision about something like that, because it needs to know what sort of punishment it really is. It's a completely open-ended punishment, and so it could be any sort of consequence, which is why financial penalties, if penalty is going to be imposed, be more reasonable, because then you know actually what you're doing to somebody. You're causing them £100 or £200 worth of damage, not something completely open-ended. Having said all of that, enforcement just seems to me a complete distraction. What we're talking about is an industry that's failed to engage with the net, has failed to license its products properly, has failed to get its act together. And now they're saying, well, in order for our act to be got together, we need you to punish customers. That's really, really wrong. And as we've seen in the last year, it's also totally unnecessary.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jim, for joining us.
Thank you.